Let me call now, we're going on to the, this first initiative for us, Teens for Democracy. And I would like to call up to here, first of all, Dr. Khalil, who is the country representative for Greece of UNICEF, Theoni Koufonikolakou, who is the Deputy Ombudsman for Children's Rights in Greece. Both of them represent two organizations that have helped us to bring the teenagers here in Greece. Elina Makri, who is our general manager and will participate in the discussion. And the discussion is going to be moderated by two teenagers who were the first ones who approached us with the idea of giving voice, elevating the voice of teenagers, Ines Saltiel and Alexia Papageorgiou, whom you see sitting here. I will leave the podium now, except to say 2 words on what we're doing here. This, for us, is important. It has not been done before to have teenagers, and what you see here is simply the introduction. There are teenagers, there are more than 30 who will be arriving and are already here. They will participate. They'll do their teen hacks during ADF. They will have their own meetings and they will present their own voices. For us, it is a question of developing a third conference, which would call Teens ADF. And we wanted to help this along by creating an interactive platform which we will populate with our artificial intelligence tool, the Orbis, that we're developing with a consortium of other partners funded by the EU. So, over to you, young ladies.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexia Papageorgiou.
And I'm Ines Saltiel, and with us today is Dr. Khalil, UNICEF representative in Greece, Ms. Theoni Koufonikolakou, Deputy Ombudswoman for Children's Rights and former chair of the European Network of Ombudspersons for Children, and Elina Makri, the General Manager of the Democracy and Culture Foundation. Thank you very much for being here.
We are the co-founders of Teens for Democracy, an initiative aiming at increasing teenagers' participation. Under the auspices of the DCF, we are creating a space for youth to engage in deliberative democracy.
We are fighting for our voices to be heard on issues that impact our future through several of our own initiatives and the organization of the Teens Athens Democracy Forum. In a pilot of the Teens Athens Democracy Forum last year, teenagers from 8 different countries, united by our shared goal for our future, came together and discussed issues that we're passionate about. This was a pilot, an experiment, which led to the organization of this year's Teens Athens Democracy Forum, a manifestation of our vision and the vision of last year's participants.
This year's session is an effort to bridge the gap between policymakers and teenagers on the issues of climate change and rebuilding trust in institutions. Teenagers being brought by UNICEF and the European Network of Ombudspersons for Children have 2 days to discuss these issues, come up with proposals, and present them in the main session of the Athens Democracy Forum. On a similar note, in this panel, we will be discussing elevating teenagers' voices in the decision-making process.
Perfect. My first question is for Ms. Koufonikolakou. So another aim of the Teens for Democracy is the inclusion of teenagers in local governance. As the local governments are the most important and most influential organs of government that are closest to us, my question is that considering teenagers are portrayed as the most action-oriented generation, especially on the issue of climate change, I've conducted a research paper where I brought teenagers and council members together to discuss the topic of climate action. My results show that teenagers were able to shift the opinions of the council members on issues of climate action. So, Ms. Koufonikolakou, teenagers' inclusion in local governments would introduce a new target group for politicians, making their priorities change because of teenagers' inclusion. Do you think that the addition of teenagers can set off a butterfly effect that can foster positive change in climate action?
Well, first of all, congratulations on your research. It sounds very interesting, and if you'd like to share it, we'd be very glad to discuss about it. Second, well, you know, there are many requirements for the full implementation of Article 12 that can be discussed a little bit later. But the Ombudsman, I have to tell you, within the scope of it, the competencies of the independent authority, has intervened in several cases for the adoption of child rights impact assessment, both at a national level and local government level, for the implementation of Article 12, and for the establishment of youth council at a local government level. And we're trying to convince the state to adopt these procedures, but in a meaningful way. So that's the asterisk, that's the major requirement here, that we need to do it in a meaningful, non-tokenistic, superficial way that seems to be rather popular these days. So we've already succeeded regarding the establishment of the first National Committee for Young Advisors, alongside UNICEF, in fact, that will actually monitor the drafting and the implementation of all national action plans for children. We had a positive response from the Ministry of Justice there. And we've also intervened to the municipality of Athens and other municipalities as well, sharing the suggestions of our Young Advisory Board, because in the Ombudsman each year we set up a youth council and we consult with our children regarding the standards and requirements of a youth council. See what we did there? We first listened to children, and then we moved into sharing our recommendations with decision makers. So ENOC's recommendation, the European Networks of Ombudspersons for Children recommendations on climate justice, that was the topic, climate justice, and it is quite important. Among other areas, such as education, which is a major component, access to justice for these kind of violations, refer to consultations with children that are child-friendly, but engage mechanisms that are effective, and they also have ensured a variety of safeguards, such as time and resources. And I would add, furthermore, accountability. So this is another way of saying that not all initiatives are equally beneficial for children, I have to be honest with you. In order to ensure that, we have to align ourselves with specific requirement and provide safe space, appropriate education and empowerment, resources, and appropriate feedback. That means establish accountability mechanisms when someone does not answer, and come back to the young people's recommendations. I have to say something last. For example, we have a law 3443 of 2006 that is currently in force in Greece that provides for local youth councils. Did you know about that? We have a law that provides for local youth councils, but first, not all municipalities have complied with the provision, and second, even those who did have not in all cases applied procedures that ensure meaningful participation. If you meet once a year and resources are not sufficient and no feedback is provided regarding the recommendations, the results are not as positive as we would like. These are the discrepancies, or should I say the major gaps between law provisions and implementation. Therefore, of course, I think that local youth councils can play a paramount role in local governance, including climate change and climate justice issues, but only if they are respected and established in a coherent framework with standards of consultation.
Thank you very much, and hopefully someday we'll be able to move away from just youth councils and have teenagers be also voting and elected members in local governments. Alexia.
So Ms. Koufonikolakou talked to us about the scope of municipal councils. Dr. Khalil, how about international institutions? In 1992, UNICEF published the essay Children's Participation from Tokenism to Citizenship, which included Roger Hart's Ladder for Children's Participation. And this was a conceptual framework that laid down 8 stages of children's decision-making, the last one being participation, that is children-initiated rather than adult-initiated, and a shared role between adults and children in this process. 31 years after the publication of this model, do you think that it has been applied to international institutions such as UNICEF and their decision-making processes?
Yes. Thank you very much for the question, distinguished members of this panel, ladies and gentlemen. It's such an honor to be in this forum, and UNICEF is very privileged to contribute to such empowerment of young people first, but also contributing to stronger democratic practices in societies. We believe in UNICEF that child rights are the key foundation for democracy. And coming directly to your question, I would say 31 years ago, it was very much needed to empower children and young people with their right to participation. It is still very much needed today. Because 31 years are not really a long period if we take into account the centuries where when children were not recognized, their right to participation was not recognized. UNICEF as an international organization and many other international organizations is working very hard to make sure that the voice of children is heard in every single process, whether is it administrative, legislative, whatever affects the lives of children, the children's voice has to be heard. And this is the spirit of Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But since you asked me whether it is still needed, I would say that more focus should be also placed on Articles 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 of the Convention, which are the right to form a thought, the right to privacy, 17, the right to information, including the right to be protected from harmful information. So these Articles 13 to 17, which constitute the empowerment dimension for young people to be able to exercise their right to participation. So Roger Hart's theory on the ladder, participation ladder, is very, very correct, very relevant, because we often deny children the right to participate, saying that they cannot decide, they cannot be the decision makers. So the ladder, participation ladder theory comes to say that listening is an active form of participation. Then, as Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child stipulates, the respect for the views of the child grows with age and maturity. And up to the point where children, young people, are part of every single decision made in the society. You mentioned the municipalities. This is where exactly effective decentralization policies should take children into account and should take their voices into account. So 31 years later, it is still very much needed globally, everywhere. Children have the right to be heard at all times. Children have the right to participate. Every child has the right to participate meaningfully in every process in the society. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is for Elina. So art transforms into a vessel for activism and political change. One of the Athens Democracy Forum speakers, Michael Nash, uses the medium of film to depict the profound impact of climate change on humanity. Theater, filmmaking, and art, with their inherent universality and their ability to convey emotions that can significantly shift someone's perspective, is crucial in the fight for against climate change and anything in political discourse. So art brings pathos into the world of traditional political discussion and conversation. The Athens Democracy Forum stands out as it combines both culture and democracy. and at the same time, you've integrated teenagers into your leadership council. So Elina, do you think utilizing art and culture will further promote teenagers' inclusion in politics and civil engagement?
Thank you for the question, Ines. It's quite difficult, and I'm impressed by your question. I definitely agree with you. So far, at the Democracy and Culture Foundation, of course, we work in the nexus between democracy and culture. The Athens Democracy Forum started 11 years ago based on democratic issues. And we started Teens for Democracy, so far we include the teens in the democracy part. But now that you ask me this question, it comes to mind a recent report from the European Commission published in 2023, this year, where it establishes, it shows a clear positive correlation between citizens that participate in cultural activities and indicators of civic engagement. So, as you say, we have evidence, and probably scientific evidence. I haven't read all the report, but it's from international experience, that this is something important. And we started in the Democracy and Culture Foundation, Teens for Democracy, because you asked for it. So it was not something that came from the top down. It was not something that we conceived you conceived as teens, and then we heard you, and we try, really to put you into projects. So I really consider it, that we will do something. And I look at our president here, Achilles Saltas, that we need to do something for culture and teens.
Thank you very much, Elina. And now, both Ms. Koufonikolakou and Dr. Khalil, you mentioned Article 12 of the UN Convention for the Rights of the Child. And this right is not just a substantive, but also a procedural right that is extremely important, as you pointed out, for us to be able to participate. This article states that children are entitled to be actors in their own lives and be active members of the decisions that affect them. So how can children become active participants of governmental decisions and be able to actually contribute without being subject to the manipulation of adults that might be trying to promote their own agendas in policymaking? So this is directed.
That's a very good question indeed. First of all, Article 12 is inextricably linked with the other fundamental principles of the UNCRC as well. So we have to discuss it under the spectrum of also non-discrimination, considering the best interests of children in all decisions. And this is, again, a rule of procedure, a principle, and a right, as you said, the life-to-life and survival and development. And here the committee is quite strict. They mean the holistic, moral, physical, social development of children, and also, of course, the right to express him or her views. So, having said that, one of the major components for the implementation of Article 12 for me is the adoption of child rights impact assessments in all decisions. What does that mean? It means that we're scrutinizing all budgetary allocations, all budgets, all ministerial decisions, all bills, or all legal reforms to see what is the actual impact to the population of children by involving children. So we, alongside experts, we also establish committees that work alongside and assess the impact of all decision-making to the population of children. And you know how critical this is, especially when it comes to climate justice and climate crisis. So this means that we promote another cultural representation of the child as rights holder in all decisions, but at the same time, we socially become more conscious regarding children's developmental needs. Second, it's not just the manipulation that we're afraid of. It's also what I've mentioned before, the tokenistic, superficial approach, the mere invitation that we want to avoid. So if we want children to participate meaningfully, we start with education. And I can't stress this enough. We first ensure the safe space required, because children, you know better than anyone else, are afraid of what others will say whenever they express themselves. Second, we ensure empowerment. What does that mean? That consistently and coherently, interactively, we do not just teach children, we provide child-friendly information regarding their rights and complaint mechanisms that are credible in the field. And we also ensure the audience, the adults that will listen to them, and, as I said, the feedback, the influence required. And this is the Laura Lundy model of participation that can be applied both in local government initiatives, such as the one you've mentioned before, as well as school education. And this is, in my opinion, the only way to enrich our democracies and enhance our social cohesion.
Thank you very much. I think that our time is up.
I'm so sorry. I consumed your time. Sorry.
No, but you covered everything, so...
It's okay.
Thank you very much for being here. It was great having you, and we hope that truly what we said today can be actually implemented into policy, and you can help us with that. Do we have any time for questions?
From the audience?
From the audience? Okay, we will be taking only one question from the audience. Sure. Hello.
Thank you. I wanted to bounce back on something that Ines said at the beginning of the panel to two of our speakers. So Ines mentioned the need to move away from having children and teens only in committees to having them in decision-making processes. And I couldn't agree more. I think too often we use children and teens in a type of youth washing situation instead of actually involving them. So I'm wondering what UNICEF and the Ombudsman or woman or person are doing to actually involve them and not just have them, as kind of token. And second, I think you guys are going to spend the next couple of days discussing recommendations, right? Are you going to be pushing them forward? Are you taking them up? And what are you going to be doing with those recommendations to ensure that the teens are heard at the end of the day?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll cover one dimension, which is like children being rights holders. So that's why the title of the article or book you mentioned, From Tokenism to Participation. So children are the rights holders. They are empowered to participate meaningfully. So they are not used, and at the same time, they know their rights very well. Because rights start with knowing the rights, demanding the rights, and defending the rights. So this is where children will be able to express and to be part of every process without being used under tokenism.
But would they be able to make decisions with you?
Sorry?
Would they be involved in the decision-making?
Absolutely, they should be involved in the decision-making. But we should not forget that Article 12 mentions also according to age and maturity. So as they are growing up, they contribute more and more to decision-making, but their right to be heard starts from the first minute, and their right to have a dialogue, constructive dialogue, to respect. So this is the process. And then all the mechanisms like youth councils and municipalities, etc., all these mechanisms ensure that children are heard and are part of every decision in the society.
Yes, of course. We set up youth councils every year. We work with children, we consult with children, we visit schools, more than 90, 100 per year. We interact, we discuss, we take the recommendations quite seriously. This year, they also work on the topic of enhancing independent child rights institutions. So they had a lot to say regarding our efficiency, our visibility, and our accessibility, and we were listening like humbly. And the second, of course, we're pushing. But if you want my opinion, we have to assess on whether we are loud enough in terms of actually escalating this kind of pressure to decision makers. So naming and shaming for independent authorities that do not have the right to impose sanctions is the only resort. So it only makes sense that we push a little bit more and we escalate our pressure more when it comes to public discussion. Extroversion, right?
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you for...
I have a very brief just comment because maybe the audience doesn't know that there is a parallel session this year with teens. So the two organizations have brought teens from other places outside of Europe. And teens, we will have sessions on their own that they will deliberate. They will be, Theoni will be one of the facilitators. So children will not only discuss for the sake of discussion, talk the talk. But they will come up with concrete proposals and concrete recommendations that we'll present to the plenary on Friday. So this is part of our Teens for Democracy. They have a parallel Teens ADF, let's say.
You should all come watch the presentation of the ideas as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.